Let's learn IIB. Today, I will discuss on SOAP request node and the validation of response XML that we get from backend system. For the demo projects that I create with just one message flow and 4 nodes, I don't see the need to create a separate IIB project each time. I am reusing a project from my GitHub repository called Hello World app, link in description. This is my initial design for the message flow. You see many red X marks on screen. They represent ESQL compute module not being created, QName and WSDL not being specified on MQ and SOAP nodes. Create queues necessary for your flow. The reason I use MQ input node instead of HTTP input node or SOAP input node is to clearly state that we are only interested in testing the behavior of SOAP request node, and we are not interested in validating the consumer request message that MQ input node receives. In my previous video, I used an integration service to explain the validation of SOAP messages with SOAP input node. I will use that WSDL file in my SOAP request node. Using Toolkit, import the SOAP WSDL file into a message model that can be used on SOAP request node. You can also copy and paste the WSDL file with its many XSD files into Hello World app. But I prefer to use the toolkit for this task. All the errors from our initial design are resolved. WSDL parameters are configured automatically on SOAP request node when I select WSDL file using toolkit. Writing ESQL code for this project is very easy. Pressing Ctrl space autofills the field names as you have created a message model. Namespace variable ns was created automatically by pressing Ctrl space. Deploy and test. SOAP request node validation is set to validate content and value. Parse timing is set to immediate. Our initial test is successful. No errors as expected. I create an extra field in backend SOAP service to investigate the XSD validation behavior. I tested this modified SOAP backend service. SOAP output node has not caused any errors. When I ask SOAP UI to validate SOAP response, it complains of additional field in response. See screen for error details. SOAP output node will not validate the SOAP reply structure by default. Observe the property set by toolkit when it automatically creates a message flow for you under gen folder in integration service project type. When SOAP request node received the additional field, it created an error on parsing SOAP tree. But notice that exception list is not populated. There is a document on IBM Knowledge Center that explains the difference between exception, exception list, and other validation properties. Have a look. According to the document, we have to get BIP error 5902. What I understood as the difference between exception and exception list are exception setting causes the parsing to stop at the first failure. Exception list setting gives information on all the parsing errors. See the branching displayed in block diagram for exception list. I change the setting on SOAP request node. I change failure action from exception to exception list. Notice that the message now goes to failure terminal and recoverable exception points to the additional field that we created in the backend system. Hope this video was able to shed some light into the minor details of XST validation. If you know of similar topics where the general IIB audience would be using the node on a daily basis but does not know some interesting properties, write them in comment section. One example would be MQ input node and opaque elements on XML and SC parser options.